There we go. And I would love to lead us through just a deep breath as we enter this space together. So we want to really warmly welcome you into this Centering Justice session. And for those who may be joining us for the first time, this is really a space and place to lean into the deep wisdom and stories of leaders of color in our community as we imagine what the future looks like. And we usually sort of lean into our intuition about what themes and just how to center these conversations every month. And the theme that came to us this month was joy is revolutionary. And so I want to just turn things over to Yodi to guide us a little bit into that theme of this session, and just invite you to be really present and lean into this moment together.
Thanks, Ananya. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to invite us into one more practice because it's actually something that I need, and I want to take you with me. We've had just a devastating loss in our family, and I feel it laying on me like a blanket. And I've learned that there's tapping, and there's also a way that we can massage and touch our bodies where we can kind of throw that energy off. And I need some energy. I'm like having a hard time fully showing up. And I've got 11 other things coming on. So you all have become community to me. Can I invite you with me to what I learned recently was if you're able to put, for example, your right hand snugly onto your shoulder, and then to rub all the way, pressing firmly on that arm, all the way down to the tip of your middle finger. And then we're gonna shake it like that. And then I wanna do it again on I said right, but it's left. I'm now going to my right arm and down all the way to the center. And I'm pressing, almost squeezing on my arm, that energy that I feel, that blanket, that heaviness. And I'm gonna do it one more time. I already feel relief in my body. And one more time. And then I'm gonna speak the name of my uncle, Uncle Demsu Haile Selassie, who we lost, and just invite and evoke his beautiful spirit. He was the embodiment of joy, y'all. The biggest laugh in a room, he would fill it up. Oh gosh, by the end of the family party and a little Johnny Walker Black, Demsu had the whole family cracking up. He loved the babies. He loved to tell us the story of our history. And I just feel him in this moment and invite his spirit and the spirit of those who have passed into this celebration of joy. My God, joy can feel so fleeting, especially in the last 2 years. Joy for me and its embodiment, it feels like something I'm seeking always, y'all, looking for always. It's not happy. It's not, situational. It feels like it's deep and rooted in my soul. And I keep wanting to come back to it and come back to it. And I've been blessed to have many, many moments of joy, including this session, Centering Justice, including the joy of my beautiful son and the joy of that Stevie Wonder song, which just filled my eyeballs with tears at the bottom. You are the sunshine of my life. My mom would tell me that, and I felt it, I believed her. For Black and brown-bodied people, y'all, joy. Oh, I think we have sojourned towards joy as best we can on these lands. And we have found it in our backyard barbecues. We have found it in the poems we write. We have found it in music. We have found it, you're gonna hear Erica talk about, I don't even wanna spoil it, where we found it during pandemic. We've found it in the snuggles of our families. We have found it in our fight for liberation. And I couldn't think of a better way for us to round out this year's series of Centering Justice than to perform the ultimate act of revolution, I believe, which is to sit in the center of joy for the next 90 minutes. And that's what we're inviting you to joy, to practice, to stories, not to toxic positivity, y'all. We have to sit in what is real and true, but to joy, and to finding it, to celebrating it, to using it as a tool in our revolutionary acts. And this is a rare time where I'm not going to be able to stay with you the entire day today or the entire session. Will Jones, who many of you know, he and I are deep in some professional development over the next couple weeks. But I told the folks that are holding that space for us, I got to at least show up. This is my place. And I knew if I saw your smiling faces, I already feel my well filling up. So thanks for being here, all 56 of y'all. And Ananya, I'm gonna turn it back to you, and I'm gonna just appreciate you and Hamida for stepping in the gap for me today. I love y'all. Have a great session. I'll be here for a few more minutes, but I'll see you all soon. Enjoy the sunshine and the joy.
Thank you, Yudit. You said your mom would tell you, you are the sunshine of my life. Okay, well, we always want to invite our speakers to bring their whole selves into this space as we dive in. So in that spirit, we're going to begin, as we always do, by asking our speakers, Erica, Nyci, and Fitz, to share a little bit about the communities and identities that they're drawing upon as they enter this conversation. And Erica, if it's okay, we'll just begin with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Edwards. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm very honored and pleased to meet all of you. I know this is a large group, so we can't really share each other's stories, but I'm grateful that you've made space to hear mine. I identify as a Black cisgendered woman. I am a Metro Detroiter who identifies with, I guess you could call it a fugitive identity. I grew up between Ann Arbor and Detroit. My biological parents were very young when they had me. My mom was just 17. And she called upon a very close family friend who is my other mother to help raise me. And so I would spend the weekends and summers in Detroit, and I would come up here to Washtenaw County to be able to go to school and sort of escape the very difficult situation that was Detroit during the period of deindustrialization and the war on drugs. It was my mother's way of giving me opportunities that she didn't see as being available to her. And so that's how I identify, as one who traverses space, one who traverses place, one who, and I think that's probably why I also identify as like a bridge builder. And I'm very passionate about home place, and what I mean by that is drawing from bell hooks, who talked in the 90s quite extensively about, creating a place to be, not a safe place, right? Because that can be co-opted in lots of different ways. That term safe, it's like safe to whom, safe why, according to what metrics, and so on and so forth. But where is a place where one can just be? And that's kind of the framework that I am very passionate about. That's me. Thank you.
Nyci, how about you?
Hello, my name is Nyci. I use they, them pronouns and identify as a genderqueer Black Latinx creator. I'm originally from Southern California, and I came here for graduate school for speech language pathology and currently work as a speech therapist for telepractice. On my off time, I am a burlesque and drag performer, as well as an artist, an activist, an organizer to some degree. And I come from I feel like my identities, plural, definitely embody the sense of being in in-between spaces in multiple aspects. And so I constantly feel as though I am having to navigate what it means to constantly be on the brink of almost being and almost embodying and almost getting to the place where I need to be. And that's okay. And learning how to take that feeling and balance it out so that I can find that wholeness. And so a lot of my work and a lot of the ways that I try to exist is really learning to embody that uncertainty and the discomfort to then feel out what it means to live wholly in my body, live wholly in my joy, live wholly in this container that I have for this lifetime, and what that would mean to utilize it to connect to other people and also bring that connection back to myself. And yeah, so hello, I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really excited for today's conversation, and all the prep and conversations we've already have just been light and a very hopeful thing to have over the last week and a half. So I'm very excited for today.
Thank you, Nyci. Fitz, how about you?
Hi all, my name is Michael Fitzhugh, also known as Fitz. The reason why I chose Fitz is because there's 1,001 Michaels out there. I know you're talking to me. I identify as a cis African-American man, and I draw on the communities of invisible disabilities. I am also a born and raised Detroiter, been here all my life. I work in cybersecurity. It's been a very much pleasure over the past few days getting to know my fellow panelists, Erica and Nyci, along with Ananya, Yodit, and Hamida. It's all been a great pleasure to hear their story and also to share my story with them. And I feel a great pleasure to be able to share my story with you all here. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. I feel such brilliance from each of you already. So let's dive right in. Yodit gave us this beautiful image of a backyard barbecue and of flowing colors and delicious food and the things that nourish and sustain us. And so the question that we wanted to ask you three and invite you into conversation around is, where does the revolution take root for you? And what stories and moments come to mind as you think about how we reground in joy and abundance in our movement? And I really want to highlight that we really want to invite you into a conversation with each other. So if you feel moved to say something, just come right off mute and say it. Who's gonna go first?
I suppose I can go first. So to answer the question, Ananya, the revolution and where joy begins for me is where food is. Just to set the table for everyone here is I have an invisible condition called Crohn's disease. I've had it for about 20 years. I'm 30 now. So I've grown up with this condition. I've pretty much grown up with this condition. And I've also had a severe case of Crohn's disease. So throughout my tenure with it, I was in and out of the hospital. So with that being said, I am healing myself and healing my spirit and my physical self, my community, through food. Because there's a lot of things you can definitely learn about a person's culture, person's emotions, about a person's family, both past and present. Like I was telling my fellow panelists the other day, is that I had a barbecue this past weekend with family members I haven't seen in so long. And one of my cousins brought out a cake recipe that my great aunt made, and it was passed down through the generations. And to me, it was like experiencing my aunt's heritage and my aunt's feelings, you know, the smells, the tastes, the different emotions I can bring upon the community and through yourself was an incredible experience on seeing and experiencing my aunt from a time past. Yeah, so food is extremely important to me in my healing process and a center point of my joy. And yeah, that's where it starts with me.
I can jump in too, because we've talked quite a bit about this, how you know, similarly, I find joy at home, you know, and you know, it's because it's exactly what Fitz is talking about. It's that place where you get nourished, that place where you're sustained, that place where you're visible, where it doesn't matter how you show up. And you know, a wonderful conversation that we had in one of our earlier talks was that, you know, for BIPOC people, we're always policing ourselves, you know, when we're not at home, you know, there's this sense that you have to put on, you know, code switching, if you will. And sometimes you do it without even, you know, without any prompting. It's like you self-police yourself. And then it's kind of crazy making, because afterwards you go home and you start thinking to yourself, you know, was I inauthentic? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Could I have done this? Should I have done that? Oh, you know, on and on and on. And to me, like, home is the ability to put that down. So, you know, so the revolution is, like, for me, is the outgrowth of that home place into the institutions. When can I stop? When do I have to stop? Or when am I free to just be, you know? When am I free to just be? And that's probably really, you know, what I see as my mission.
Erica, when we were talking earlier, you shared some experiences and just moments in your life when you felt that sense of home place. Do any of those come to mind?
Yeah, sure. I think, like, so I'm a former classroom teacher, and then I was a youth-led community activist in Southeast DC for a long time. before I went to grad school and did all of that. And I think, the structures that be, white supremacist heteropatriarchal culture, mandates like a return on investment all the time. And I can remember being in work, doing sisterhood circles with homeless and runaway youth. And the most impactful times we had together were when we were doing absolutely nothing. When we weren't doing the logic model, when we weren't paying attention to the strategic plan, whatever the budget was, the initiative, right? It was in the really generative moments that we had together where we could just share and be. That was the core of the work that we were doing. And part of the frustration that I often felt was, and ultimately the reason why I left the nonprofit arena was because I didn't like quantifying and capitalizing those important relationships. It felt really disingenuous and dehumanizing, to be completely honest. And so, but when we had home place, in those 40 minutes before the group started, when young people were coming in from school, after we shared a meal together, right, Fitz? That was when we were like family and real and free, I don't know if that helps.
Thank you, Erica. Yeah, you said something really poignant the other day, that it wasn't always fun, but there was joy.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because I was working, and I continue to work with populations that are deeply marginalized, and and I was a crisis on call manager for a long time, and so getting a call at 2:00 in the morning that a 13-year-old with a baby has nowhere to go, like that doesn't feel good. And you're tired and you're overwhelmed, and you go to City Hall and you raise a hell and you talk about what you need, and then they just throw you a little bone. It's not what you need, but it's a little bone. That stuff sucks. But we had joy because that's now my little sister. That's now an individual who has a home place with me with this project. Thanks, Ananya. I forgot we talked about that.
Beautiful. Nyci, what's coming up for you?
So a lot of the things that we talk about in terms of like home and belonging, and in the question of where did the revolution start for me, I think that a lot of the ways in which we want to provide for our community, to contribute to our own liberation, to contribute to the liberation and revolution around us, starts with being able to accept the parts of ourselves that need to be liberated, and that need to be liberated from shame, that need to be liberated from the sense of what we're expected to do. And so a lot of my current values and beliefs and processes started with accepting my queerness and accepting my transness, and also being able to accept those identities outside of the lens of this colonized, just a sense of like colonized whiteness, and especially when it comes to my trans identity as being a genderqueer person, and recognizing that there has been so much that has been erased due to colonization and due to capitalism, just because we tend to, there is this sentiment of only accepting things as it is beneficial to the powers that be. And so it's like, yes, like queerness and pride and all of these things are coming to the forefront now that it is something that is beneficial to those with the most privilege, right? And so in addition to that, in our previous conversations, we were talking a lot about like, how do we know what joy looks like, or how do we know where the revolution starts? And I think that not only was it coming from this acceptance and really leaning into that and learning about that myself, learning about what these words even mean for me and attributing that meaning to different things, but then also being able to know what those things were not. Because if we're constantly in these places where we're having to be convinced of what these definitions are, what we're having to be convinced of what joy should look like, what our lives should look like, because if it looks a certain way, if we enact in a certain way, that keeps the system going. By removing myself from the places that tried to convince me what my joy should look like, I was able to actually see what it was for me. And it didn't come from this place of, oh, well, this is what self-care is. Oh, well, this is what, your boundaries should be. This is what you need to be accepting if you are really a trans person, if you're really a queer person, if you're really a Black person, if you're really X, Y, and Z, if you're really a creator or an organizer or an activist. These are the things that you should be doing in order to embody those identities, when the reality is, it's like, no, why find the most joy in being able to fully accept and embody all the parts of myself outside of the lens of whiteness, outside of the lens of what other people are trying to convince me that it is. Because in removing those limitations and accepting that there is a plurality of existence, that means I can then actually be liberated, instead of I don't have to worry about my lane necessarily. It's like I can fully take up all the space in this container that I have, instead of trying to make it fit to what is most beneficial for the systems that do not benefit me. And then I think too, that definitely has been the catalyst for really trying to pursue art from a place of what I actually want to create, and actual creation, actual drawing creation. And it comes from the place of it being mine, because especially as Black people, so much of our work, so much of our creativity, so much of the things that are meaningful to us and that are sacred to us are then co-opted and capitalized, and it no longer belongs to us. And there is such a shame, there is such a sense of shame and erasure and dismissal when we try to claim things for ourselves, and without people realizing, it's like, we're not claiming this for the sake of taking it away from somebody. That is kind of the point of abundance too, where it's like, we're not coming from scarcity, we're not just taking, we're not taking it because we're afraid to lose it. It's like, we're creating and making and existing because we deserve to have things that belong to us in order to make us feel like we belong. And it's now, when it belongs to us, when something is mine, it's coming for me, and it's not coming at my expense. It's not coming from this place of, I'm doing it from a place of resistance all the time. It's just what Erica was saying. It's like, we get to just be. We don't have to convince the world around us that our art, our creativity, our bodies are worth it, or they're worth loving, or they're worth existing. It just is. And what a luxury that has become, to do something not in spite of,
I appreciate you saying that so much, Nyci. It reminds me of what we've gone through over this past year with the pandemic, and how like grind culture, hustle culture has come to the fore. And, there's this perception that if you weren't using the pandemic to like start a side business, or, write all, be the most creative you've ever been, or, drop your day job to, pursue your dream, like there was that toxic positivity that Yodi talked about, really kind of infiltrated society, and had this really kind of poisonous effect, that sort of suggested that if we don't, deeply meditate on what this epochal period, this very strange transitional time period, we're in, that if we're not pausing to really kind of honor the depth of this collective trauma that we're experiencing as humanity, that we're somehow less than, and that's all deeply embedded with, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant work ethic, and the perception that indigenous and communities of colors, philosophies and epistemologies around rest and rejuvenation, like saying that they're pitted against one another. All of that stood out in stark relief for me during this time. Because to me, it was sort of like, no, now is not the time to start a business. Like, now is the time to start thinking about our relationship to the environment, because that's why this all happened. And to pause and be intentional about our practices, to come back home. It was time to go home and go inside, physically and spiritually, etc. So I appreciate you for bringing the fact that that we're encouraged to disassociate from our bodies and ourselves and our life. I appreciate you for raising that point, because this time period is calling us back to our bodies and back to our pluralities of existence, like you talked about, to really evaluate and honor them.
I think too, going off of that, I'm looking at the chat, and there's a comment in here that says, one thing that became clear to me this past year is that communal mourning in Black queer / Black queer communities is a value I took for granted. And bouncing off of what you were saying, there is this sense of how often is the opportunity for us not only to rest and pause and reflect, but even just to grieve is taken away from us. And I feel like something that was put into perspective this year, especially for myself, was just this idea that, when we were talking about like the duality of certain things, or that the ways that society has made it so that we can't contain multiple feelings or multiple ideas at once. And so I think this time has really allowed a space to be able to take the time to not only grieve, but also know that holding grief doesn't mean that you cannot also hold joy. Those things are not, one of those things will not outweigh the other. Sometimes one might be heavier to carry than the other, or there might be more opportunity for one than the other. But I think that it really pointed out that despite all of our grief and our pain and our mourning, it's like those things are also necessary in a way to truly understand and have gratitude for the joys that we can have in our lives. And at least I know for me, it made it so that the sheer amount, I had a death in the family, I had a relationship separation, then there was a pandemic, then there was, injuries, all sorts of things that were happening in addition to a global pandemic. And because of this pandemic specifically, I was able to actually sit and just let my body do what it needs to do to actually feel all of those things. And by being able to, because we're also constantly pushed to just get over things. We're constantly, like you were saying, we're constantly pushed to disassociate from what we are going through, and to be able to take the time to understand the fullness of my grief and not shorten it, not cut it off, not make it smaller than it actually is. It's like now when I experience moments of joy, I can actually be present for those things. Because I understand the gravity of what these emotions, what these feelings are.
I agree with you, Nyci. Like when you were saying that, grief and joy, one may be heavier than the other, but I thoroughly agree that grief and joy go hand in hand. You can't have grief without joy and joy without grief. And I think that's one way on how we grow, as an individual and as a community. And I also agree with what both yourself and what Erica was saying on that it was time to come back home. I also lost it during the pandemic. I lost two grandfathers during the pandemic. And also, I also agree with Erica was saying, you with Anglo-Saxon work ethic, you're always on. Especially during this pandemic, I was always on the go. Like, okay, since I'm working from home, like my meetings have went like out the wazoo. I was in meetings left and right, had no time to, sit back. Okay, grieving my grandfather's, grieving with my family, but also celebrating my grandfather's lives. It wasn't all about the grief, it was about the joy too. And now that I had time to actually, take a step back, take a deep breath and really survey my environment, my area, I was able to find the joy on, like I said, to celebrate with my family on, my family passing and trying to move forward and still trying to, celebrate even amongst all of the tragedies that are going on today. It's a lot of grief that's going on, but there's still a lot of joy that can be found and expressed through so many different things. Like me, through joy, through food. When I got back home during this pandemic, I cooked so much. So this past year, I bought my first place, my first condo. First thing I finished was my kitchen. I got all my kitchen gadgets. I was cooking and everything. That brought me so much joy, especially during those hard times with this past year of people being shot needlessly. Me losing my grandfathers, the stresses of work. Food was one central way on how I can really center myself and really ground myself with my community, with getting recipes from my grandmothers, my aunts, my uncles, even cousins I haven't even talked to in years. It was a true eye-awakening experience for me.
I think a question that is coming to me at this moment is, so I think we're surfacing this really beautiful and poignant tension between grief and then the joy that just emerges through that. And I think the question that finds me is, where or how does joy emerge for you?
Excuse me, I think it goes back to kind of something that Nyci was talking about, where it's almost like you have to kind of know what it is not in order to be able to know what it is, which goes back to this idea that, we have to resist the dichotomy that we are either this or that, that we're either joyful or we're not joyful. It's like, no, it's all part of a like beautiful, intimate relationship, where you have to experience some things. And I think that's so important in justice work. I think a lot of times we want what we want because it's right and we're right. But like, if we can embrace the struggle. I mean, if you think about how the histories of Black study and Black thought, it's always talked about. Assata Shakur talks about how, struggle is a part of liberation. There's no liberation without struggle, and that struggle is beautiful because you clarify yourself, you clarify your demands, your needs. So, where does joy emerge? Where does it arise? It arises from, embracing all of yourself and all of your experience, and hopefully not in a way like to the exclusion of others, like I'm not talking about like a toxic narcissism where it's like I can disconnect from other people because I'm going through what I'm going through. Not that, it's about acknowledging that we're part of this broader collective humanity, an ecosystem, really, right? Where my experience is connected to another's experience. And, therefore it's important for me to wade through myself in communities with others so that we can clarify what we need together, And I think that's where joy exists for me, right? In creating community together. sharing our struggles and wading through the tensions together, that becomes really hopeful and joyful.
I think that all of that, thinking about community, thinking about, again, like we're moving away from this idea of like dichotomy between like packaging everything as separate, right? When we think about the self that is in connection to our community, and also thinking about what Fitz was saying, where it's, if we are, especially when it comes to things like food or very, I guess, like sacred and pointed aspects of our various cultures and identities, it's like even in thinking about the ways that we build connections tangibly here in this plane and in the abstract and in community indirectly, where it's, if we're cooking a family recipe, it's like, this connects me to my family, this connects me to tradition, this connects me to things that have already come to pass, and feels to me like putting myself in a place where I feel like I belong, because this has been done by so many generations before me, as a way to exist and just be like, just exist in my own humanity, you know, because this is what I associate with my family. And then and it's like a kind of like a type of time travel, to be able to embrace these traditions and then also bring it to the forefront and share it with the people who are around me here and now. And then if I, were to have children in the future, or if they have children in the future, then to bring that into the future place and just come like full circle. And I think too that when we think about the way that joy emerges, it's like thinking about embodiment, thinking about safety, thinking about belonging specifically, because I feel like a lot of the themes that we have touched on, especially when it comes to like food, when it comes to community, when it comes to home and safety, is like this idea of belonging and knowing what it means to truly belong, knowing what it feels like to belong, and really, really leaning into this idea that it's not a bad thing to feel things. I feel, and I say I feel a lot, but it's being able to feel into that sense of belonging and knowing when something feels off. And so being in spaces in which all of those different pieces and parts are not only welcome, but they're celebrated, and they also connect you to other people. And so I often find myself trying to be more intentional, especially these days, where if I'm in a predominantly white space, for example, being able to be connected with myself and my identity enough to hold my own boundaries, and also know being able to discern whether or not I'm welcome, and not having any of the associated shame that comes with that, because we talk about code switching, we talk about navigating different spaces and knowing that sense of safety. And so I think for me, being able to discern where that exists also means that when I am in spaces around people who understand what that looks like, who see the entirety of myself, who see and resonate with the ways that I exist in this world, that for me is where the most joy that I've been able to experience comes about, because it allows space for not only myself to exist in my fullness, but allows space for other people to exist in their fullness. And it doesn't feel as if it is something that I'm doing for the benefit of other people. It's not, it doesn't feel like there's a taking. We can give and we can give and we give, and then that allows us to grow instead of depleting us. I'm not drained afterwards. I'm not exhausted afterwards. Or if I am exhausted, it's usually because we've had so much fun that I'm literally just tired and I want to go to bed. It's not I don't feel like my spirit is smaller for being in those spaces.
Yeah, Nyci, you shared about how these last several months were an opening for you into the fullness of that experience. And you also shared about music and movement. I wonder if some of those moments come to mind.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I'm a breast dancer and I'm a drag performer. And pre-pandemic, something that really something that really had come to mind that I realized I needed was just, I was going to queer nights at least once a week, and performing or just like dancing and being in community with those places. And as much as stress and, as much as what was happening during my day job, which I love, but it's also can be very taxing, it gave me a sense of, I think, having spaces like that, and specifically when it comes to music, like having a sense of hope that I'll be able to be not only surrounded by my community, but I get to dance and play and just whatever ends up coming forth, like specifically when it comes to the idea of moving away from grind culture, moving away from productivity. Dance for me was and is a form of play. It's a way where I can release myself and just be silly, be goofy, and like enjoy the feelings that come with the ways that I'm embodying the movement. And then just being around my friends, being around my chosen family. Like, I never knew how badly I needed those things in my life to have something to keep me going until we weren't able to do that over this past year. And I had actually hosted a digital disco show, because something else that comes up when I think specifically of joy is disco. And how in my immediate family, that was something that I associate with like past parties and specific family members. But it's also just thinking about disco as an era, thinking about disco, what it means specifically for like the queer community and the drag community, and how, excuse me, thinking about the ways that music and musical revolutions come about during times of, during really hard times, during times of depression. When we have disco, it's coming out in a community where we weren't allowed to exist, right? And so having these places and spots that were existing as a resistance, and it's not to say it's not a struggle, but it's more of the like, hi, it's like we are living and enjoying ourselves. And even though it is literally illegal for our bodies to exist at that point in time, and even in places now where it's like we see this commodifying of pride, we see the commodifying of queer culture, but we are still out here finding ways to be in community with each other and enjoying ourselves. And I think for me, and just thinking about how we want to encapsulate like joy as a revolution, it's just like, hi, just the fact that we are existing in spite of everything telling us that we are not allowed to, is something that has been my biggest inspiration in terms of like the type of work that I want to do, because that it gives us something to live for. It gives us hope. It's like, yes, we can struggle, we can fight, we can do all of these things, but it's like at the end of the day, it's like once the work is never done. But if there isn't something that that is worth all of this fighting for, then why are we doing this? So we need that joy. We need something to give us that hope. We need that spark to keep things going, because like it gives us the reasons for our whys.
Fitz, what's coming up for you?
I like how Nyci was saying that dance gives her a reason to exist. That's a very, very powerful statement right there. And I can say the same thing for me, and like I said, with food. As I mentioned earlier to the group, that food is not just a way to experience joy, but it's a way to experience pain too. Like for example, when you're making a pie from scratch, or you're making pasta from scratch, you take the flour, you take the eggs, you beat everything, you mill your flour. You could be compacting and pressing the noodle into something that takes time, and that sometimes takes pain from a cut. You could smash your finger sometime, and good things come from pain. Good things allows you to make you feel alive. And I feel that, food for me, especially with having an invisible disability, it's allowed me to, feel alive, allowed me to be in a safe space, allowed me to have my imagination roam when, I had nothing else to do, when I was bedridden for all those years. And now that I'm able-bodied and able to share, my experiences through food with my loved ones, and how Nyci was saying, my chosen family and my actual biological family, and how everyone was saying that, I think Hamida put in the chat that food, it really is a way for you to experience, your legacy, or leave back a legacy on, it gives you an impact on a way how to, connect with your past and your future. I can make a recipe that can be given to my loved ones years down the line, and they can experience my joys, my pains and everything through food. Be like, hey, yeah, Uncle Mike or Papa, great Papa, make this. And it's a way to experience me, and like how people are saying, time travel through time and touch their life, because I don't know a time when I haven't tasted some good food from my great aunts, and I'm like, ooh, auntie, what you do to this food? You put your big toe in this food, right? And it's so good. So that's like, joy comes from food to me, right? It's incredible. It's an incredible way to express yourself, express your imagination, and to simply exist. That's where joy comes from me.
So beautiful. And I think I hear each of you through your stories also talking about joy and community and belonging. And yeah, I don't know exactly what the question is there, but just maybe it's, how is joy for you tied to community?
I think for me, it's going to come back to that home place idea. Like when I'm in community, like deep, meaningful community, not just like, in a neighborly way. But when I have connection, you have the freedom for all of yourself to be present. You're not trying to compartmentalize or fragment or hide. You're just in deep and meaningful relationship. I think so much of what we've been tasked to do when we're trying to make systemic change, requires us to bend and shift in all these like weird ways. And it feels like you're justifying your existence, which is like so harmful, violent. It's very violent to have to justify your presence on the earth. So I feel joyful when I'm in community because I know that I'm not doing that. There's nothing about me that has to be explained.
Nyci or Fitz, does that question spark anything for you?
Yes, just like what Erica was saying, where it's this sense, excuse me, not having to explain myself over the past year and the various places that I've been able to participate has been such a game changer in a lot of ways. I think specifically thinking about the ways that I, as a performer specifically, I tend to be in a variety of spaces. And pre-COVID, I was traveling, I was going to different cities and different bars, things like that. And even though I haven't been able to go out as much as I would like to, I haven't been able to be in those different spaces, it really pointed out the ways in which I was having to shrink myself in order to not feel comfortable, because it was never a comfortable feeling, but it was more of that sense of like the survival instincts kicking in. And, you know, that code switching is very specifically the ways that we've learned to assimilate and shrink in order to make sure that we don't come off as threatening, to make sure that I think at some point earlier, someone had made a point about this idea of heroics or having to be exceptional constantly, right? And we talk about like Black excellence, and simultaneously, I think that the things that I'm learning now, especially when it comes to joy and being in community, is the fact that, sure, do I want to embody excellence and celebrate that? Fine. But also the amount of joy that comes with just being mediocre and having that be okay. Like, we can do that, and that is fine. I will still be accepted and loved and worthy of being able to just not have to excel at everything I do in order to feel safe. And that is something that I am great. I grieve for, and I am grateful for, because when we look at all of these different spaces in which it's that whole notion of like twice as good to be half as accepted. To me now, I realize that my true, genuine connections and community come from being able to not have to prove myself, to not have to excel, to not have to I don't have to engage in this meritocracy of like, hi, I am worthy because these are all of the things that I am amazing at, or these are all the things that I can provide you with. These are all the ways that I can prove that. And especially when I think about like activism work or thinking about community work, it's this sense of, I don't have to be the person to make someone else feel good about themselves, or to remove that sense of insecurity, or to appease that sense of saviorism. I can instead be in community with people who allow me to exude my full humanity, whatever level that looks like, and still be celebrated, even if I'm not having to prove my excellence constantly.
I think, like for me, just before I give you an answer, Ananya, can you repeat your question one more time?
Oh, just an invitation to talk about how joy is connected to community.
Right. It's like, for me, joy is connected to community. So just to take a step back, you know, with me having an invisible condition, I experienced so much, you know, discrimination, you know, all through my young adulthood to my current adulthood. And then just what Nyci was saying, not being able to have to explain yourself. So like, there are times where I had to, growing up, well, why aren't you coming? Or why aren't you doing this? Because I really don't feel good. But just because I physically, you know, on the outward doesn't look like I don't feel good, I may not feel good internally, right? So I think what connects me to joy in the community is, like how Nyci was saying, it's not having to have the urge to explain yourself. If I don't feel good, just leave it at that, right? If I want to be in my space with my family, my support system, not be out and sharing myself with the world, I am perfectly fine with that, right? And I want the world to be fine with that, and not being pressured and having to, you know, show up in ways I don't even want to show up, right? I can just, you know, be in my own lane, be in my space, being around my chosen family, my biological family, my friends, and my other loved ones, and not having to simply explain myself. Period.
Okay,
That's what brings me joy.
I'm sorry, I got so excited that you said that, Fitz, because one community that I'm a part of is a local organization here called Untold Stories of Liberation and Love, which is a poetry group for women of color in Washtenaw County, specifically in Ypsilanti. And that place has really cultivated joy and community for me, because I'm a researcher, I'm a faculty person at Wayne State University. And when you're a part of academia, like, your whole job is to justify everything that you do. Like, everything has to be logical, linear, complex, sophisticated, quote unquote. And you're always putting yourself up for scrutiny by, experts or whatever. And, you get rejected every time you turn around. And Untold Stories has really kind of created this safe space for me to, do what I love to do. And that's just write, like if you contribute, you're accepted. There's not an editor looking at it saying, that's not good enough, because it's your truth and they honor, respect my truth. And even participation is very organic, in the sense that calls go out and they say, please join us if you can, but there's no one over the head like, you need to do this, you need to do that, and what has happened is, this really kind of community that is authentic has emerged, because everyone is accepted as they are, and all of the gifts and talents that are shared are honored. Like I'm not a poet by training, but sometimes, especially over the course of this pandemic, I needed to get something out that I needed to say, and in the context where I'm currently situated, like saying something is complicated. But Untold Stories has really created this community where it's like, yes, please say something, and allow us to support you in getting the word out. And I don't know, I'm really excited about the work that they're doing, because I feel like it's a new way of doing justice work.
Mm.
So I want to transition us into a sort of wrap-up prompt, and it's going to be two prompts wrapped into one, I think. So the first is just a reminder, I think, to everyone in this space that one reason that this space exists is to lean into the wisdom of leaders of color in our community so that we can envision and remake the future. And so one question we asked in our planning with this group was, what does the future look like for you? And we had a nice dialogue around that question. And I want to tie that into our final core question of what asks, demands, or invitations would you like to extend to the people in this space for how we must and will move toward that future? And whoever is ready, yeah, whoever feels moved.
I would say the future for me, it looks like being in a space that, like how we were saying earlier, not having to explain yourself, right? If you want to be present, be present. If you don't want to be present, you don't have to be present. But like for me, in my case, with an invisible condition, I would say, know, especially if you are an employer, know who you're hiring. And if they tell you they have some type of invisible condition, don't just take it for face value. Just like for Crohn's disease, a lot of problems I run into, people just think like I have a regular stomach ache. It is not a regular stomach ache, right? There are a whole lot of factors within Crohn's disease. So, but I think there's an obligation for employers and also your loved ones who may have it, research what could be triggers, research what could be healing processes, research what could be something that could be uplifting. It's just know who you're working with, know your audience. That's what the future looks like for me. Know your audience.
Thank you, Fitz. How about Nyci or Erica?
I think the future looks like a lot of different things. And when I think about joy, when I think about, joy specifically for Black and brown bodies, I think that one, that we need to accept the fact that, like, yes, these things take time, but also there needs to be a transition period in which we're healing from all the things that we've been through. We talk about coming to this utopian future of what society could potentially look like, what communities could potentially look like, but I don't feel as though we'll be able to truly engage with that until we have a period in which we are decolonizing, where we're dismantling the things that have put an unfair and unjust amount of labor and hurt and violence against the most marginalized. Because we constantly talk about equity, we constantly talk about, unpacking our privilege, et cetera, et cetera. And even in those spaces, at least now, I feel like there are so many times where those who have more privilege, those who have more resources, whether they do it consciously or unconsciously, are putting a pressure on marginalized bodies to work through. And Erica had mentioned something earlier in the chat. Do we allow BIPOC individuals to have grace? And so I think that in order to get to this point where we are truly embodying the sense of like grace and compassion and transformative justice and joy and liberation, we first need to ensure that we're allowing space for that transition and that healing and that grace for the bodies that have not been allowed to be people, who have not been able to embrace their humanity due to the systems that be. We need to be able to understand what the needs of the most marginalized are and what their true needs are. And so one of the things we talked about, what asks, demands, or invitations, like I would simultaneously, it's an invitation and also a demand that those who have more privilege, specifically like white bodies, allow space for Black and brown bodies to be able to exist removed from the ability for white bodies to benefit from that healing. So if we are going to talk about investing in liberation, we talk about investing in joy, that also means we need to divest from this sense of like codependency and narcissism that surrounds the current talk of like decolonization. Like if we're talking about decolonization, that means we got to remove the colonizer, right? Like it needs to go. And that even for ourselves, like especially as Black and brown people, like how many times that we shame ourselves or get caught up in this spiral of the self-shame or like limiting ourselves or shaming ourselves about not being able to rest or grind or be productive, right? Like we need to dismantle the systems and that does take time. I also think that there needs to be spaces like in tying into that, like making sure that when we talk about having spaces specifically for marginalized bodies, that it doesn't come at the expense or at the additional effort of those same bodies. So if those with more privilege, those who have more access to resources are interested and invested in doing this work, I don't want this to turn into like, and I think about it in performance spaces and art spaces all the time, where it's like we're asked to be included or asked to be represented. And I'm like, that's good and all, but if I look out into an audience and I see a white faces, to me, that doesn't necessarily feel empowering, because it just feels like, okay, like you are hiring me yet again to like put on a show for you to like demonstrate that like my art is worth it or that like my body is worth it. And it's like, no, it's like, for me, that would be if you are truly wanting to do that work, it's like, take yourself out of the picture. If you see a Black and brown organization that's trying to do some work or have like a joyful space or even just a party, it's like, give them the money and the resources to do it and then dip. Like, and I don't feel like that is something that is common practice at all right now, because people want the credit. And it's like, so finding ways that you can take the ego out of it, take out this sense of like power, where it's like, I need to divest from my whiteness, and therefore it's like, here you go. I'm invested in your liberation, and I also need to recognize that I have nothing to do with it. So like, here's what you need, like, tell me what you need, listen to what we need, not this is what I think you need to do. Like, I know better than you because we know what we need best. So it's like, here are some resources, here's some access. Now I'm gonna go, like, have fun. Yeah.
Yeah, those were both such fantastic things. I was like kind of jotting down all kinds of stuff as you all were talking. So what does the future look like for you? I think like that the past, 18 months has shown us what is possible, and I think it has taught us that the future isn't 20, 30 years from now, the future is tomorrow. And so the question then becomes like, what am I doing today that makes tomorrow move in the direction that we need to go, I don't know. I really appreciate all the things you were saying, Fitz, about making space, like understanding what space looks like. And in one of our conversations, we kind of asked these questions where we said, okay, if we're going to talk about making space, are we talking about inclusion or are we talking about belonging, like we talked about before? Is this just a matter of having a certain number or type of person in the room? Or are we really like vetting our systems and vetting our structures to find out how they impact people across identities? Coming back to this idea of intersectionality. So systems don't affect all people in the same way. Policies don't affect all people in the same way. So, really looking at your policies and your practices to say, am I having a differential effect on certain groups, right? And paying attention to those in your groups, in your organizations, in your programs, who are quiet all the time. And then going to Nyci's point, not placing the burden on them to teach you what you need to do to support them. I mean, I have a prime example of that in my workplace. We've really been trying to push towards intersectional justice in the program that I'm a part of. We've been having these like really conversations all throughout the whole year about what we're going to do, et cetera, et cetera. And then the time comes to engage adjunct faculties and other, folks who are teaching classes that we have less control over. And me as the only Black person in the room, everyone pivots and say, okay, now you'll teach them what we've learned, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute. We spent this entire year doing this work, I thought, together. Why do I have to be the one to teach it, right? And it's the same with the people that are in our organizations. Are we demanding that they teach us how to treat them, right? Because that's not fair. And then I also appreciate your other point, Nyci, around divestment. How are we interacting with the power systems that we're subject to? Think about your board of directors, think about the philanthropy groups that are supporting your work. Do they represent the aims and the vision for justice that your organization has? And then are you challenging them? Are we sitting back and allowing ourselves to be the puppet of a board that maybe doesn't look like our community? Or are we meaningfully engaging in dialogue to tell them, like, this is what you have to understand about the community that I'm building, right? And that's how you have real joy, right? Because at the end of the day, you can go home knowing that you were an ethical person. And it's difficult. It's really difficult. You're going to feel afraid, and you might lose things, your livelihood, your job, but that's something you have to evaluate for yourself. Am I serious about justice, or is it cute? Do I want joy or do I want happiness? Happiness is like, you can spend your money on Amazon, you know, and you know, have a cute house or whatever, you know what I mean? Joy means that you were on the right side of history. You stewarded your privilege well, and you're a good ancestor for the next generation.
Thank you for leaving us with those powerful questions and words. So a friend and colleague of mine taught me a really beautiful exercise of just pulling little phrases and words within sessions and creating a small poem out of them to read to the audience at the end. And so this is just a way to wrap us up, and it's words from Erica, from Nyci, and from Fitz, all mixed together. So here we go. What is joy? Where do I feel it? Where do I find it? The hush harbor, the place where we're safe, loving on each other through the hard times. The sense of joy, it's food for me, a way to help my imagination come to life. Food hits something in my spirit. It's the process, the love, the feeling, the smell, the chopping and stirring makes me wonder what my family was thinking when they were making these recipes. It's a way to experience joy and also pain. What joy is not? So much of our existence chasing things we already have. Allow me to entrench in my roots, connect with places of myself I haven't looked at. White supremacy will make you believe you're crazy, but really it's that feeling inside of you. Joy lives in belonging. I want to exist in a way that lets me exist. Yes, the work is hard, but there's something to be said about the sacredness of what we have at hand. So thank you for those powerful, powerful offerings, Erica, Fitz, and Nyci. And so I have a feeling just in the responsiveness to this session that some of you may have come to this space today holding questions. So I want, if anyone in the audience has questions that you're holding, I'd like to invite you. Maybe you could put them in the chat if you have questions. And then while you're sharing your questions, I also just want to share a couple of wrap-up notes. So one is that we are taking a little hiatus from Centering Justice in July, just in July. And in that time, we'll be really looking back on your feedback and your experience of this session, and trying to think through how to hold this space going forward. And on that note, in August, when we return, I'll be joining you in the audience. I'm actually leaving you and starting graduate school in the fall, and my colleague Hamida will be joining Yodit to carry this series forward. And so if you have any questions about the series or anything, anything that comes up for you, you can contact Hamida. Hamida, do you want to say hi? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Ananya. Hello, everyone. It's been such a pleasure to be part of the audience for the last few months, as well as, really see Ananya hold an incredible space with Erica and Nyci and Fitz. Yes, that's right. Trinigo. But, just so glad to be joining in August with Yodi to keep us centering justice past, beyond, kind of what was our evolution, our little start a year ago. So thank you for that intro, and really, really looking forward to being with this community in August.
Okay, so we are going to put a link to the survey for this session in the chat, and we would really appreciate those of you who are here to take a moment to share your experience. And then we'll just invite anyone who'd like to stay on and share your questions to either put them in the chat or just come right off mute and let us hear your voice. Hey, Jermaine. Are you feeling shy today, people?
I've got one question. Hi, everyone. I am Jay. Yeah, great conversation, great points from everyone here. I do wanted to, and I was thinking, as I was thinking about this, there's been a lot of conversations about bodies and, our bodies have an agency over our bodies and things of that sort. But I wanted to get y'all's opinion on, the conversations about how our bodies changed during the pandemic and the culture of, body positivity versus body neutrality or health at every size, or, thinking about the relationships with our bodies during this time, especially, thinking about Fitz's story with his, relationship with his body and having Crohn's disease. So I would love to hear, what if you have any stories or any anecdotes about in relation to that topic. I would love to hear from your perspective as to how your relationship with your body has transformed throughout this pandemic, whether it be mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever. Thank you.
That is a
I
wonderful.
can start.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Nyci.
Oh, the disadvantage of Zoom and all of these mute buttons. So being a speech therapist, I work with students with a variety of disabilities and needs, and I'm also somebody who has endometriosis. And when the pandemic hit, like something that and I think going back to our conversation about like recognizing what our needs actually are, because we talk about body positivity and accepting our bodies, etc. And I think in that we inherently have to talk about ableism in a way that we haven't really been able to or have chosen not to do, right? Where it's part of bodily acceptance is also accepting that my body has needs. And while it's something that I believed in and talked about and had conversations about, I don't think that I was fully able to embrace that until this pandemic, because since I work from home now, if I'm having a pain flare up, I have the ability to log off and go do what I need to do to manage my own pain. And recognizing how much, not even just, I don't want to say more efficient, but just the more capacity I have to show up in the other parts of my life, separate from my job, separate from, because I was able to manage the things that I needed for my body and to like allow that to be and not have to push past pain. And I think that's also something that comes up a lot for me when I think about like Black bodies specifically, and how often through and how that informs, like in the medical industrial complex, how that informs the ways that we're treated when we express that we have pain, when we express that we have needs, when we express that a medical treatment isn't working, that we have to be our own self advocates and fully recognize like what it is we actually need. And so I think through this pandemic, for myself at least, it's like being able to see that discourse and the conversations that we are now able to it's not necessarily always happening, but I feel like I see a lot more discourse and a lot more acceptance about tending to our needs as Black and brown bodies, and being able to advocate for myself in a way that I haven't been able to before, and also accept that for myself, and leading to a more fulfilling livelihood because I'm not constantly having to push through pain at the expense of the rest of society, all as much as I was in the past. And that's something I would like to definitely see continue moving forward. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I appreciate that how, this year on Zoom has really transformed what is acceptable in terms of how we adorn our bodies, Like, do I really need to wear a three-piece suit? Do I really need to wear designer clothing to get the work done? Do I even need to leave my house to get the work done, Can I do the work and then have a moment in my garden because that's what's going to help me be a healthy person, So that's what's going to help me take care of my body. I'm not grabbing lunch on the go. I'm actually preparing a meal and sitting down with my children for lunch, So I'm taking care of my body through the pandemic, I think, in a way that's very different from before. And also, I think it's fantastic that I can wear pajama pants and, and a neat shirt on top, and it's fine. We can still make it through our full day of meetings. So yeah, I think it's shown us what's possible for our bodies.
I want to hear what Fitz has to say, and then Audrey also has a question. So let's hear from Fitz and then bounce to Audrey.
Wow. So this pandemic has affected me in so many different ways, bodily wise. So I, with, me losing 2 grandparents, I did go through a massive flare up. And I did lose a lot of weight. So it was a very emotional and physical roller coaster for me. But I agree with what Erica is saying. I don't need, I feel highly comfortable showing up to work in pajama pants, especially if I'm not feeling well or with a pillow on my stomach, typing about, or, simply not having to rush about to get food, right? The agency to sit here and then also to prepare something nice and healthy that will suit my body more so than something that McDonald's or Burger King or even sometimes the corporate calf would, right? Because I know my needs better than any corporate body would. So it's been really an eye-opening experience bodily, through the pandemic. And I'm grateful that I was able to, find myself and being able to have these aha moments on how I can better suit myself moving forward, because I really don't need to be wearing, like how Erica was saying, I don't need to be wearing the 3-piece suit. I don't need to be wearing designer shoes or my Kohans or whatever. I don't need to be wearing man heels clacking down the hallway. I can just sit right here, be present, and then being present on where I need to be healthily wise in other aspects of my life while also being productive. So it's been an interesting experience that I'm still learning about myself and moving forward about myself.
Fitz, and we are right up at 1:30, so for anyone who needs to go get some lunch or move on to the next thing. Hey, Iris. Thank you so much for being here. And for anyone who has a minute or two, Audrey, would you like to share your question? Oh, you're muted. Can't hear.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to make this question easy and quick. If you choose to give a one-word answer, that's good. Am I still muted? Okay, I see the caption. The caption is slower. Got you. I'm impressed with the fact that you hold on to joy. You have joy. Joy is within you, even through pain. I see that as a victory. So if you would just give me one word in regards to your source, a source that's within you for having that joy, even through pain.
One word.
Okay,
That's
go with two. I'm just trying to I'm trying to make it fast so folks who have something to do, you know, they
Right.
can.
Right. That's a great question. Like for me, the simple fact that I am sufficient brings me joy. My sheer sufficiency is what brings me joy.
I love it.
I would say connection, either to myself, to my loved ones, to the community around me, to the earth, to water. But I think connection in all of its forms has been my like go-to grounding and my joy.
I love it.
And I would just say my relationships, spiritual, familial, ancestral, all those things are my source of joy.
I love it. You guys are wonderful. Absolutely beautiful.
That is such a beautiful question to carry with us into the day. What is your source? So with that, we will see you in August. And thank you again, Erica, Fitz, and Nyci, and everyone else. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ananya and
Gotcha.
Hamida. Thank you, Nyci, Fitz, and everyone who joined us.
Thank you.
All right. Bye all.